Gone global. Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, like it or not, it is the Brexit election. You can cut it whichever way you like, but this is the issue that is dominating everything. And we know what Mrs May says. She says under her, Brexit means Brexit, and we know that the Liberal Democrats want to reverse the whole thing, and we know UKIP want it to be done more quickly, and actually think maybe Article 50 could waste 2 years of our lives. But the question is the Labour Party, and Labour have a problem. And the problem is simply that 70% of Labour-held constituencies voted for leave, yet 90% of Labour MPs voted to remain. So they're split. Always a problem for a party when it's the key issue in an election. And for weeks on this programme, I've been saying, what on earth is Corbyn's policy on the EU? Because I can't decipher it. And I've been asking you to ring in and tell me, and no one yet has really succeeded. Well, today was the day to put all of this to bed, because the shadow Brexit secretary, Sir Keir Starmer, somebody who without doubt is one of the Labour Party's best performers today, he was on the stump explaining exactly where the Labour Party stand with regards to Brexit. Here he is.
Now, as Jenny has said, we accept that things will have to change. Our relationship with the EU is going to change. But we do not accept that Brexit has to mean whatever Theresa May says it means. We do not accept that there has to be a reckless Tory Brexit. Remember that part of the Prime Minister's speech where she said she wanted out of all parts of the EU, all parts, including those agencies. Now, I've worked with Europol and with Eurojust, and I know what they do 24/7 to help keep us and our EU partners and everybody within our countries safe. And to simply walk away from those agencies on ideological grounds, rather than starting negotiations saying, we want to stay in, we want to find a way, is fundamentally the wrong approach, and we will reverse that.
So is that clear, everybody? Have you now got it? Do you really understand where Labour stand with regards Brexit? Well, it seems actually, from hearing Keir Starmer today, that whilst he does say that, the Labour Party can't rub out the result, whilst he did say we accept it, we respect it, actually, most of the speech today was talking about the bits of the European Union that he wants us to stay in. So I'm asking you tonight, do you believe the Labour Party when they say that they accept that the UK is leaving the European Union? And I will put a quick view on the table, having looked through everything that Keir Starmer said today, and given that this will be their definitive speech on Brexit, it seems to me that they want to leave the European Union in name only, because the effect of it wouldn't really be very different. I mean, take, for example, the big issues of the single market and the customs union. Now, nobody could dispute that every leading player on the Leave side and the Remain side last year said, if we vote to leave, we are leaving the customs union. We are leaving the single market. And yet, Keir Starmer today says that whilst access to the single market will be changed, the government should leave all options on the table. So he's kind of saying that maybe we can stay part of the single market with a couple of reforms. And when it comes to the customs union, he said it's an absolute imperative for businesses to be able to trade as successfully after Brexit as before. So you tell me what you think. I think they want us to leave in name only, and actually they'd sign us up to virtually everything. So tell me, if you think, actually, no, they're going to do the job, they're going to honour the will of the British people, then call me on 0345 6060 973. If actually you want them to be a bit more like the Liberal Democrats and to fight Brexit every inch of the way, you can text me on 84850. If you think that what you saw today means that actually on this key issue they have slipped into virtual irrelevance in this election on the key issue, then using the hashtag Farage and LBC, you can tweet at LBC. You can follow us live on Facebook as well. Are they really going to see this through? Now, one thing that he did do today, that I thought was quite interesting, that in fact I didn't disagree with, is he felt that Theresa May should guarantee the rights of EU citizens currently living in the United Kingdom before the talks even start. And I have to say, personally, I think if she did that, she would gain the high moral ground, before this whole thing had even started. And I've always thought we should do that. In fact, to me, that's the one thing we should give, because whether too many came or not, everyone that came at the time legally. Let's see whether this sparks fascination or whether, in fact, you're actually pretty confused. I'm going to go to Larry in Richmond and ask him, Larry, good evening. Are Labour going to take us out of the European Union, or is it all a giant con job? Tell me.
It's all a giant con job. I mean, Nigel, this is a conversation I've been looking forward to having with you for a very long time. I actually met you when you was on the battle bus during the referendum campaign. It'd be great to grab a pint of IPA at some point. But
right, okay.
I mean, this is the day we've all been waiting for. Labour to stand up and say what their Brexit plan is. And I think when you look at it holistically, I mean, what they've basically done is they've come out onto a stage and they've said, at the end of the day, Mark's just Mark, really. They've said the EU's just the EU. We know people want to leave, and I mean, we might leave, we might do it like this, we might keep the name, we might keep the union. Oh, we'll go back on this promise. And I think one of the fundamental things to kind of remember here is...
Larry? I've lost Larry. He was just warming up too, wasn't he? Oh, dear. He must have got excited and dropped the phone. So we'll try Shahid in Hemel Hempstead. Shahid, tell me, are Labour really going to take us out of the European Union, or do they want to keep us in it in all but name?
No, I think they will do it, but they didn't frustrate Article 50. They don't even frustrate this early election. Turkey's voting for Christmas. They know that if they were to block it, then that would be the end of the Labour Party. The public wouldn't forgive them. It would probably cause them, civil disorder. What they're doing is very similar to the Conservatives. The Conservatives are saying what the public want to hear. Oh, we're not going to go for the customs union, we're not going to go for the single market. But they are really saying, if you listen to David Davis and Theresa May, if it's possible to get a deal to negotiate access, and that's the key word, access, not staying in the EU in all but name, but if we can negotiate some sort of special deal which will be very similar to like an associate membership, then that's what they'll try to get. But if it becomes too tough, too awkward, then they'll walk. It's obvious to see between the lines. And what Keir Starmer said about wanting to protect jobs, or when companies get into some sort of disputes, to have some sort of court to go to within Europe, because the Europeans aren't going to agree to come to a British court, that makes sense. It doesn't mean that they're going to try to wind people up or try to keep us in through the back door, but those that do will pay the electoral price for it.
Well, Shahid, I mean, there are disputes mechanisms under the WTO as well. But no, I get your point that in some ways, perhaps on trade, perhaps Labour and the Conservatives aren't that far apart, and perhaps what we're going to find, despite all the rhetoric from Mrs May in the election, is that a couple of years down the road she's done a variety of deals. But I tell you what is different, Shahid. There was a part of Starmer's speech that I thought was very, very interesting, when he said, we'll make sure that all EU-derived laws, including workplace laws, consumer rights, environmental protections, are fully protected without qualifications, limitations, or sunset clauses. So what he's saying is that even outside the European Union, we would basically mimic every piece of existing EU law, and as they make new laws, we would have the same ones. He wants us to have regulatory equivalence. And I think what Keir Starmer here was saying is that actually, outside the European Union, the framework for every business in the United Kingdom, be it the corner shop or the biggest bank in Canary Wharf, would remain exactly the same as the rest of the European Union. And I genuinely think, Shahid, that is what people did not vote for in the referendum last June.
That's what the Conservatives can do the same as well, aren't they? That whole repeal bill is more like it should be called the big adoption bill, because they're going to copy all the existing treaties into the British law, until they can work out what they want to keep, what they want to get rid of. This ain't going to be like a 5-minute job. We have been members since 1972 to 1973. And there's lots and lots of laws, so they will have to have a proper good close look at what they want to keep. But while we're going through this transitional period, while we're negotiating, because otherwise we're going to get companies wanting to do deals with EU companies, and they'll say, sorry, we'd love to do a deal, but because you don't comply with EU standards no more, we can't do it. That's what they're trying to protect. Don't get too upset about this. I just think they're just being sensible about how to get the best deal, while we still have our own independence. Once we're out, we can't be told what to do, but if we match their standards, we can still do deals on that basis. That's what they're all angling for.
But there is a big world, Shahid. There is a big world out there outside the European Union, isn't there? And we don't comply with every piece of American law or Chinese law or Indian law. No, Shahid, you made a very interesting point in that call, which is actually, in terms of business, their approach. And if you listen carefully to what Mrs May and David Davis are saying, they're rather similar. Larry, you've come back to us from Richmond. Carry on with your line.
I'm back from the dead, Nigel.
Right, very good.
So, yeah, just carrying on, I guess, from where I left off with the kind of Marx just Mark EU comparison comment. I mean, it all sounds like a soft Brexit to me, Nigel. That's what I'm going to say. I mean, the issue here is that I don't believe they have got a stance, Nigel. They don't know what they want. And that is why I genuinely don't believe that they'll take us out. Because I think it's a way to get on in for them, isn't it? They know that Brexit is a key issue in this general election. And to be honest with you, it's probably the only leg they've got to stand on, considering they don't really all like Corbyn. But anyway, back to the point. Genuinely, do I believe that Labour will take us out? Of course I do. I actually do, Nigel, when it comes down to it. I mean, don't get me wrong, Nigel, I started my career as a coal miner. I was mining gold in the coal mines, and I voted for Labour for many, many years. And now I've swung to the completely opposite side of the pool, because I think the only people that are going to deliver the Brexit that we voted for are the Conservatives.
Well, that's the pitch, Larry. That's the pitch that Mrs May is making to the country, despite the fact having for her whole political career defended all things European and voted for everything in favour of Europe. And I have to say I've clashed on Question Time with Mrs May when I've been arguing the Eurosceptic case, and she was absolutely pro the whole thing. Maybe, Larry, you're right. Maybe she is an absolute convert. I thank you, and I thank you very much for your call. I'm going to go quickly to Sam in Stoke. Sam, are Labour genuinely going to take us out of the European Union?
No, I don't think they really want to, Nigel. I've been, great appreciation what he did. I saw you at the Go event in Stoke, and I was out campaigning throughout. And I know that people voted to come out, to leave the single market, to leave the customs union, and all this word games and semantics. We see through it. It's just a scam. And I used to be a Labour voter, and they can't see that the European Union has damaged and hurt the working class more than anyone. The cheap supply of labour, the demand for public services. It's easy to be generous with other people's money. It's easy to be blasé about public services when you don't depend on them. When you've got the money, go private. And that just shows that the Labour Party don't represent working people anymore. They don't. They're like an Oxford Student Union meeting. It's all rhetoric and ideology.
And Sam, as you say, people were very clear. And I remember that big Go rally we had in Stoke. It was funny because I had Labour people on the platform. We had people from all parties on the platform, including Cabinet Minister Chris Grayling, who said to me on the way home, he said, as a Conservative Cabinet Minister, that's the only time I will ever get a standing ovation in Stoke-on-Trent, which was the amazing thing about the referendum. Sam, you're dead right. We voted to leave the single market and the customs union. And today we have Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary, talking about whether our future relationship can be best achieved through reformed membership of the single market. Sam, I get your point. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Brussels, and it's 7:15. Shadow Brexit Secretary Sir Keir Starmer had the chance today to lay out the Labour Party's position on the issue that is defining and dominating this general election, namely Brexit. And I have to say, I think what he gave us were mixed messages. On the one hand, we respect the result. On the other, we could do all sorts of future deals to keep us part of a reformed single market and customs union, and in regulatory terms, we would be, for British industry and British business, identical to the European Union. So I think he wants us to leave in name only. On Twitter, I get, seems less of a speech and more of a desperate rant. Promising the moon and stars is never a good idea. Well, he was promising quite a lot. He was attempting to reach everybody. Another one I get on text, I think there is a lot of support for respecting the Leave vote, but staying in a single market with free movement, if necessary. Well, if that's your position, then Keir Starmer may have appealed to you today. I am certain that Labour will go through with Brexit, but I'm equally certain that under them, the deal we leave on would look suspiciously like the one we have now, says Mitch in North London. Well, Mitch, that is my point. I think what we saw from Keir Starmer today is that if Labour were to win this election, we would leave the EU in name only. And I thought the most damning thing that I saw today after Starmer's speech was a tweet put out by Robert Peston, ITV's chief politico, and he said this. He said, Starmer told me he would be prepared to see the role for the European Court of Justice continue in some form and preferential immigration rights for EU nationals. So let's just get that straight, shall we? The Brexit spokesman for the Labour Party says if they win power, he's quite prepared to see a continued role for the European Court in Luxembourg to overrule us, and that actually, far from ending free movement, we would have preferential immigration rights for EU citizens over the rest of the world. Frankly, I rest my case, ladies and gentlemen, callers. I rest my case. They want us to leave in name only. They're putting out extraordinary mixed messages, and I think today has done their general election prospects a huge amount of harm. Tell me I'm wrong. Call me. Robin Chelmsford, am I right, am I wrong?
Well, Nigel, I think you're partially right, but I think you're wrong in terms of what you said the voting paper said. The voting paper asked us whether we wanted to leave the EU. It didn't ask us whether we wanted to leave the customs union. And yet you keep saying this is the will of the British people. Well, actually, we don't know. I've got a number of friends who voted leave and want to stay in the single market customs union. So you keep quoting this, and basically what Labour has said is exactly that. The British people voted to leave the EU, but they haven't voted to leave the customs union.
Well, what I'm saying, Rob, is that during the election campaign, David Cameron and George Osborne and Nick Clegg and, everybody, Peter Mandelson, you name it, everybody from all the parties that were backing the Remain camp said, you do realise if you vote to leave, we are leaving the single market. And everybody on the Leave side, from Boris Johnson to Michael Gove, through to, some of the Labour Eurosceptics like Kate Hoey, to UKIP, everybody on the Leave side said, if you vote to leave, we are leaving not just the single market, but the customs union, so that we can negotiate our own global trade deals. Rob, I don't think there was any doubt about this.
Well, I think there's absolute doubt about that. The messages during the referendum were very, very mixed on both sides. I grant you, both sides made claims, but both also made claims that we could still be in it afterwards. So the messages from both sides are mixed. I'm not necessarily saying you're 100% wrong on that, but Boris Johnson, blimey, he was all over the shop throughout the referendum.
Well, to begin with, the sort of couple of days after Boris had come out and said he was going to back leave, he was asked this question by Andrew Marr, I think it was, and he couldn't really answer it. But within a couple of days, he'd sorted his position out, and he was absolutely consistent and clear for the rest of the campaign. And Rob, there are many things, in that referendum and the conduct of it on either side that we can agree with or disagree with. But Robin Chelmsford, I maintain my point that when it comes to the single market and the customs union, it couldn't be clearer. And that's where I am. I thank you. And if you do know people that voted to leave but wanted to be part of the single market, I don't disbelieve you for one moment, but I would suggest they're small in number. Staying in the same county, I'm going to Peter in Brentwood. Peter, good evening.
Nigel, hello there. Yes, you've let the cat out of the bag, which was precisely the call I was going to make. Nigel Peston about the ECJ. Now, the point is, this is more than just the Labour Party saying this. It was in, I think it was Spectator magazine. They revealed that there's actually a negotiating, well, it's going to be more than that. The Commission is going to insist that any reciprocity deal with EU citizens and our citizens abroad will be subject to the EU citizens having guaranteed protection by the ECJ indefinitely for all rights, and that means, well, now the point is,
Peter, that is what people in Brussels want. But you would think, to listen to this, that we were a third world country. Not the country of Magna Carta, not the country of common law, not the country that has sacrificed much to help democracy and freedom everywhere else. I mean, it's a ludicrous idea that we would be unfair to individuals on the basis of nationality, isn't it?
But, Nigel, this is a red line. They want to make this one of their initial red lines. And Labour Party know this, Keir Starmer knows this, and that's why they're conceding this straight away, because by doing that, they're going to concede the ECJ still will rule rule it in this country. And that's the point.
Peter, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. Did you vote Leave or Remain?
Well, I'm half Italian, Nigel, and I voted. I was a reluctant Remainer. My family were all Brexit. I'm now Brexit because I had the Pauline conversion when Theresa May became Prime Minister. And I believe the fact she's the person who will deliver what obviously now is going to be Brexit. And I think that the country realises that. And there's a lot of people like me who were Eurosceptics, but we thought I didn't want to be, if you like, the country which started, if you like, the collapse of the EU, which I think will happen because the European Union is the Eurozone, which is the problem. It's like a golf club where everybody's forced to play up the same handicap.
And there's no country, Peter, where that is more fraught today than Italy, who'll be having a general election, we think, in February of next year, and where there may well be a majority in the next Italian parliament favouring leaving the euro. Peter, I thank you for your call. I asked Hugo in Wimbledon. Hugo, will the Labour Party carry out a genuine, sincere Brexit?
Hi, Nigel. I think Labour's position is perfectly simple. I think they want to take us from being half in the European Union to being half out of it. And therefore, I have absolutely no faith in them to deliver the Brexit that I want to have.
Right. So you were a Leave voter, Hugo, and you rather agree with me that they would take us out in name only, yeah?
Absolutely. I just don't understand what they're actually saying, because they say they're prioritising access to the single market, which is a silly thing to say anyway, because everyone in the world has access to the single market. But the European Union is saying that the four freedoms are completely indivisible. So if they're saying they're going to prioritise access to the single market or membership in some sort of way without freedom of movement, and the European Union says, no, sorry, we're not going to allow that, then are they just going to go, oh, all right, then we'll stay in? It's an absurd position. I don't understand it.
But isn't what they're really doing here, Hugo? They're trying to keep people in the party, voting Labour, who are tempted by UKIP or tempted by Theresa May. They're equally trying to keep in the party people who are tempted by what Tim Farron is saying about second referendums, and, well, even Tony Blair too, of course, and maybe overturning it. So they have been losing votes on this issue now for some years. They're potentially bleeding votes at both ends of European opinion within the Labour Party, and wasn't what Starmer did today a carefully constructed attempt to keep everyone together without actually saying anything of real substance or anything that is memorable?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I mean, they're trying to have their cake and eat it. They're trying to ride two horses at the same time.
Exactly. And that, Hugo, is why they're in big trouble. I thank you for your call. Simon in Bolton, where Theresa May, of course, launched her general election campaign. Simon, how are Labour's prospects in Bolton with today's messages?
Well, first off, Nigel, lovely to speak to you. I met you when you came to Bolton yourself, so lovely to speak to you. I've been trying for weeks to get on. A couple of points.
Well done.
I think it's all a red herring, as I said to your producer. I don't like Keir Starmer anyway. I think Bolton are going to go Conservative, where I am. Bolton, I think it's Bolton East, Great Leaverish area. I think they'll go
North East,
Conservative. But just quickly, Nigel, the other point I just briefly want to make is I do listen to LBC a lot, and I was tuned in this afternoon, and a caller rang in, a person from Chelsea, basically said that all the numpties from the north who voted to leave didn't know what they were voting for, and this, that and the other. Now, I'm ex-military. I've fought for Queen and Country. I voted leave. I knew exactly what I was voting for. I knew exactly what it was. I did all my research. I'm getting a bit sick to death of all this. Every time you hear them, they don't know what they voted for. They don't know what they're doing. I know what I'm doing. I'm 60. I know exactly what I'm doing. And the last thing is, Nigel, God bless you and thank you for everything you've done for this country.
Well, thank you, Simon, and
I'm honoured to
thank you, and I'm pleased I met you on the referendum train, and I remember with the open-top double-decker bus coming into that square in Bolton, seeing hundreds of people there from right across every age, every class, every race, every party, all there, hundreds of them, in that town square in Bolton. And as you say, Bolton voted out. And I'm not sure the Labour Party's prospects have been improved in Bolton today, because what Starmer has done, he's tried to keep everybody together in the Labour family. And actually, on an issue as clear as Brexit, I think you have to make a decision. And I think Labour, frankly, are more doomed this evening than they were this morning. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Rupert Bartier. Well, we're talking about Sir Keir Starmer's speech. He's the shadow Brexit secretary, and whether it's clarified Labour's position with regards to Brexit. And I don't think it has at all. I think it's a desperate attempt to try and hold his own party's vote together. Well, compare and contrast that with the Prime Minister, Theresa May, who today has been to South Wales, somewhere that I've spent a lot of time in over the course of the last couple of years. I did it as UKIP was growing in Wales. I did it as the Brexit vote was growing in Wales. And I think everybody, I think all the clever people were absolutely stunned when Wales voted to leave the European Union. So Theresa May's been down there today saying to people that every single vote counts. She's been in Bridgend. Opinion polls are saying that the Tories could make gains in heartlands, and my goodness me, the last time the Tories had a majority in Wales was the 1850s. She said, while she wasn't complacent about the polls showing she was ahead, she wanted her hand to be strengthened in Brexit negotiations. She wanted people to vote for a stronger Wales. She said any other vote would be for a weak and failing Jeremy Corbyn, propped up by a coalition of chaos. Now, whether you agree with Mrs May or not, there is a certain clarity of message here. I mean, I quote, "This is an election where every single vote counts, and every single vote for me and Conservative candidates will be a vote that strengthens my hand in the negotiations for Brexit. Give me a mandate to lead Britain. Give me a mandate to speak for Britain. Give me a mandate to deliver for Britain." I have to say, you know, whether I think she's absolutely sincere in this or not, elections are won by people delivering clear, easy-to-understand messages. And I think Theresa May is doing it, and I think Sir Keir Starmer and Jeremy Corbyn are not doing it. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that, Clive Bull will pick up that thread when this programme finishes at 8 p.m, and you can debate that. But I have to say, honestly, it is, in terms of political messaging, it is very, very clever stuff. Now, we are going to go back to this question. So, on the one hand, we're told that it's OK, we're going to respect the result, but on the other, Keir Starmer tells us he'll do whatever he can to get Britain as part of a reformed relationship with the single market, the customs union, and will copy all EU laws, and we're prepared to accept the jurisdiction of the European Court. They're lining us up, I think, to leave the EU in name only. I wonder what Elaine in Cobham makes of that proposition. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I have no trust in the Labour Party carrying out any of those promises. I think I have no confidence in this comedian, Jeremy Corbyn, and the likes.
Is he funny, Elaine?
Well, he's funny that he thinks that people actually take him seriously. I think he's a bit of an embarrassment for our country, really. And, you know, gosh, you know, there's just no way anyone can possibly imagine him as our Prime Minister. It would just be such a disaster for this country, and I don't think he's going to actually do terribly well at the general election. But as for Theresa May, who, I mean, I voted Leave and I vote UKIP, and I think I will be voting Conservative in the general election, although I am a strong UKIP supporter. But Elmbridge came out as Remain, and Dominic Raab is our candidate, and he is a very strong Brexiteer. And I think we need to support Brexit. We need to put country first, not party first, in this particular situation. But what worries me is that Theresa May seems to have done everything right. She hasn't delivered much. She's like when she was Home Secretary. She said all the right things, but she didn't deliver. Okay, fair enough, her hands were tied because, you know, we were in the EU, and therefore all of our MPs were limited with what they could do because...
Yeah, but Elaine, she'd never admit that, would she? I mean, I remember her being challenged on this. How can you reduce numbers when we have an open door to the EU? And she gave the impression that she could. Elaine, you make a couple of very, very strong points there. The concept that there are issues that are bigger than our identity with any individual party, I completely get and I completely understand. And on our side of the argument, Elaine, you're making that argument and I make that argument too. And Tony Blair, of course, is making that argument on the other side because Tony Blair thinks it's vital in our national interest to stay part of this union. And so he's telling people, vote for the most pro-Brexit candidate with a chance of winning. So, Elaine, you and I think that we own the country argument, but there are people on the other side, Elaine, who think it's in our national interest to remain part of it.
But Tony Blair was a strong anti-European when he started off as Prime Minister, and there are lots of things on YouTube to reveal his past speeches that have been very highly critical. And it just seems to me that most MPs seem to be very critical of the EU. Even David Cameron was, until they seem to be sucked in and seduced by EU promises of a position down the road for them that is going to give them a high salary, like Neil Kinnock and his family.
Elaine, let me tell you, Elaine, and thank you for your call. Let me tell you, I'm in Brussels now. It can be a very intoxicating place for British politicians. Your texts and tweets, by the EU's own rules, leaving means coming out of the single market and the customs union. Yeah, that's what I understood too. A tweet here, how about the Norway Plus deal? That surely was envisaged as staying in the single market, says David. Well, some people talked about Norway Plus, but actually it was the other side that kept talking about Norway and its deficiencies. And I feel very sorry for the Norwegians, and this is worth thinking about in the context of what Starmer has said today. The Norwegians voted not to join the European Union twice, and without a referendum, their government and parliament signed them up for membership of the single market and the Schengen free movement area. So I feel very sorry for the Norwegian people, and I suspect there are referendums coming in Norway soon to give her the chance to leave that single market. Nigel, the Ramonas think they know what we voted for. We voted to leave, full stop, says Brian. And David on Facebook says, Labour offering to give whatever it takes to stay in the single market and customs union is all the proof we need to know Labour's Brexit plan. I'm going to go to South Wales appropriately now. Ross in Port Talbot, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. So you're in strong Labour territory there, Ross, or it always has been strong Labour territory.
It's in our blood.
Yeah, I mean...
It's been put in our blood. My great-grandfather, my grandparents, my parents, your next-door neighbour, everyone in this town bleeds red. It always has, with the steelworks, the miners. The whole history of Wales has always been Labour. And Miss May is now in Bridgend today, where she's going to take a lot of seats out of the Labour constituency. I was talking to Stephen Kinnock 3 weeks ago about this, and then no one knew about the snap election. But now to hear that the Conservative Party could be taking seats off us, it's a worrying time. But my problem is, I voted to leave. And I'm a strong Labour man, always have been. I'm 28 now. And somebody's always been in. You grow up, you vote against the Tories. That's the way that Wales has always been. But I'm thinking to myself, I wouldn't trust Jeremy Corbyn as far as I could throw the man. And to hear that he wants to take out Trident, he wants to take us out of the EU, but keep the single market up. Now, I didn't vote for that, but I'm a Labour man, so what do I do? That's the hardest part. You know?
Well, Ross, I said at the bottom of the hour that I've been to South Wales a lot over the course of the last few years because when I was leading UKIP, we saw it as territory in which we thought we could do well. Everyone laughed at us, but in fact, we won half a dozen seats in the Assembly, and we had some remarkable progress in Wales. And what we found was people like you who couldn't believe the direction of the Labour Party, couldn't bring themselves to vote Conservative, were voting UKIP. And the question is, in this election, are people like you either going to stay at home because they don't trust Jeremy Corbyn at all, vote UKIP, or listen to Mrs May and vote Conservative? And some of the polling, Ross, is suggesting that it's possible, and albeit 6 weeks to go, it's possible that Wales could finish up with a majority of the seats held by the Conservative Party, which seems incredible. What do you think you're going to do, Ross?
Well, my grandfather voted UKIP in the last election. I was on a knife edge with him. You guys ran a massive campaign, and it did turn a lot of heads. You know, the state of immigration in this country is out of hand. Everything in this country at the moment, it just seems like we're in a minefield. During the US election, there was people protesting in Castle Square in Swansea against the US president that they didn't even know anything about. But yet again, they will not stand up and protest for our own NHS in Wales.
Ross, what I think, Ross, what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to ask you, when we end this call, I'm going to say to the producers, I want to come back to you over the course of the next few weeks, because I think the way that you vote or what you decide to do, they're important all, but coming from a traditional Labour family may well be one of the factors that determines just how big the Conservative majority is going to be. Ross, I thank you for your call. It must be difficult being as angst-ridden as you are. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Brussels, and it's 7:45. The Labour Party say they accept and respect the referendum result and will take Britain out of the European Union. That's how the speech started today from Sir Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary. But by the time it ended, it was pretty clear to me that he wanted to leave the EU in name only and basically keep us signed up to pretty much everything. I got a tweet here saying Labour could offer me 100,000 sterling in cash and I still wouldn't vote for them. Next one, clarity of message, care of Linton Crosby. Nothing whatsoever to do with Theresa May or her beliefs. Coalition of chaos. Top marks for that, says Martin. And in some ways, Martin, I'm with you. I've no idea what Theresa May really believes, other than she spent her entire political career slagging off people like me for daring to suggest that we should take back control of our country and its borders, and now she cherishes it. Perhaps she really has been through a great St. Paul on the road to Damascus conversion. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Otherwise, gosh, wouldn't the electorate really be con this time? Andy in Fulham, we're talking about the Labour Party. Have they convinced you today they've got a clear Brexit strategy?
Not in the slightest, I'm afraid, Nigel. I think it's typical Labour Party. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is a dichotomy between what Mr Corbyn believes and what the Labour Party believes in. And from my personal perspective, I'm from Booton, Liverpool, so working-class boy, ended up living in Fulham, Chelsea, and being an investment banker. So I'm sort of what these people want us to be with regards to politicians, come from nothing to make something. So my entire family still vote Labour from a historical perspective. Well, my question is, okay, so where do I kind of fit into this entire world? So I don't believe what he's saying. So we're talking about aspiration and people wanting to do better. Is it the case that as soon as you do better, then what happens? Who do you vote for then? And I don't see how. Well, I
guess it depends, Andy. I guess it depends really where you see this country in 5 or 10 years, and whether you think Brexit ultimately is good for the ordinary people or not. I mean, I genuinely think that what has gone wrong, not just in the European Union, but across much of the Western world, is that we've seen this coming together of the interests of the multinationals, some of the big investment banks, most of the big political figures, and the European Union has been, in fact, in many ways, the perfect embodiment of all of that. An organisation that makes its rules to suit the big and suit the rich and damages the small. So Andy, my view is that actually, and yeah, we'll need the right government and we'll need the right decisions to be made. I think Brexit actually has the opportunity to make those towards the bottom of the pile have a chance at getting a better, even break. That's my view, Andy.
And I totally agree with you, and that's why I voted Brexit. I wasn't considering what would be good for me personally. I voted what's best for the country in 10 to 15 years' time. And I've been trying to explain to my Labour voting family that this might not feel great in the next 2, 3, 4 years, but over time, this is the best thing for us. I also believe that the EU is a flawed concept. If anyone's ever studied it, which I did at university, a political union, an economic union leads to political union. So people need to understand the concept of what they're voting for. And I think there's not enough clarity around that. And I think a political union eventually is not what everybody wants. So taking a little bit of our power back now is we still want to be part of the single market and trade-free barriers, etc., with tariff-free trading zones. But overall, that's what they want as well. And we keep saying WTO rules, which people keep stating about, and they actually don't really understand what they are. That's not the point, because they also have to abide by them as we do.
Well, end of the day, Andy, as you know, and by the way, I've not met many investment bankers that came from Bootle, so it's great. But I honestly, you know, if you've got a good or a product that someone wants to buy and the price is right, they'll buy it, and that's what it comes down to. Andy, quickly, have you decided, how will your Labour traditional family vote? Will they still vote Labour in your view?
Half are coming around to the idea that they need to vote tactically and vote Conservative because it's the only way to keep the country strong. Because they may want to vote Labour, but they will not vote for a president like Corbyn.
Yeah. Brilliant. Andy, thank you so much. Fascinating phone call. Nigel, some say we should be like Norway. I say take the R out of Norway. That's what we want, says Barry from Tamworth. And I'm going to go, that's very well timed, Barry, because I'm going to go now to Jonathan, who is calling from Norway.
Hello,
Good
Nigel.
evening.
At last.
Good evening.
Well, you're fascinating, everything that you've done. First of all, I'm just wondering why, if Labour are like 20-odd points behind in the opinion polls, why is there so much discussion about what they might or may not do? And there is the other thing, of course, is that by the time Brexit has been decided, whatever we're talking about now might be completely different. There is the other thing, of course, is that even if we do have access to the ECJ, if we don't implement the ECJ's judgment, what's actually going to happen to us? Because Norway ignores the EFTA court and the EFTA Surveillance Authority. And as far as the EEA agreement is concerned, Norway unilaterally imposes tariffs of hundreds of % on European-made cheese and sausages and hydrangeas. Now, you probably know about that because you're in Brussels.
Well, Jonathan, Nick Clegg, he was our Deputy Prime Minister. He told us that Norway have to accept everything that comes from Brussels, and they live in a faxed democracy where the laws are simply faxed to Oslo. So you're telling me that's rubbish, and that actually Norway do stand up for themselves?
Well, there's a Danish member of the European People's Party who's actually campaigning for Norway to be kicked out of the single market or to be kicked out of the European Economic Area because of the way that they interpret the EEA agreements, which is, I mean, in theory, Norway cannot be compelled to accept a judgment from the EFTA court. But there's a kind of gentleman's agreement, a bit like, you shouldn't park your car in the captain's car park at the golf club, that you should actually adopt it. But they don't. And so what I'm saying is that now, the way that I see it, ultimately the buck stops at Brussels, because when the Norwegians put these unilateral tariffs on all these European produce, Brussels sort of turned around and said, right then, 250% tariff on Norwegian fish products, and let's see who blinks first. But instead, Brussels said, well, this really isn't within the spirit of the EEA. So if Norway seemed to be getting away with it by Eurosceptics all over who are members of in the EU, they're going to say, hang on a minute, we're real mugs for being in the EU and obeying these rules.
So are you saying, Jonathan, are you seriously suggesting that the Norwegian government acts in the interests of the Norwegian people?
Yeah.
Good Lord, what a strange... that's a very odd thing to do, isn't it? I thought we were all signed up to some high European ideal now.
No, if you Google hydrangeas, EFTA, EEA, Danish, and whatever it is, you'll find it. Now, because in theory, Norway's pretty rich it's one of the richest countries in the world. So rather than worry about what happens to a bunch of hydrangea farmers, they could have said, look, here's 500 grand, go and farm something else, or emigrate,
Jonathan,
go and retire to France or whatever.
It's a fantastic phone call. I wish I had a 3-hour show, because we could talk hydrangeas forever. But wonderful phone call. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Are you listening, Mr. Clegg? Norway are not supine. They stand up and look after their own people. Wish our politicians had done that over the last few years. And I'm going to go to Angelina in County Durham. Angelina, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you again for what you've done for this country. Me and my family are absolutely over the moon with the referendum result, and we do thank you for that. I've been trying to call you the last couple of nights, actually, and for one reason, Jeremy Corbyn, I don't believe he could lead us to a successful exit of Europe at all. He goes one way and the other within hours. 1 minute we've got Trident, the next minute we haven't. All of his MPs are all over the place. isn't very secure, and everybody wants to feel secure in a government, no matter who you're voting for.
But you're up there, Angelina. You're there in hard Labour territory. Do you think the Labour vote's in trouble even in County Durham?
Of course, I've never been a Labour voter. I've always voted a different party every time I've voted. I always look at the ins and outs of things. My father was hard Labour. He was a miner, and he started voting for Margaret Thatcher in the 80s because then he opened his own business. But my cousins and family are all very hard Labour, and they're always having a go at me. You're far right, you're all this and all the rest of it. But, I mean, that's beside the point. But with regards to Theresa May, yeah, I do understand fully that, you know, she didn't want Brexit. She wanted to remain in the European Union. And I feel bad for her in a sense, because I feel people are calling her a hypocrite, even though she's Prime Minister.
Do you know what, Angelina? Do you know what, Angelina? I wouldn't feel too sorry for her. She's over 20 points ahead in the polls. I thank you for your call. I got a text in here suggesting that Tony Blair's backing the EU because he wants to become the next EU president of the European Commission when Jean-Claude Juncker steps down. Blair, president of Europe, I would have thought he had bigger global ambitions than that. No matter, my final thought is that to win a general election, you've got to have a good, clear message on the key issue of the day. And what Sir Keir Starmer did today on behalf of the Labour Party totally and utterly failed to do that, and I believe they are doomed. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night from 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins. But up next from London, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you very much. Now, a lot's been said about Jeremy Corbyn. We've been pulling apart everything he's been saying, but not really Theresa May. So tonight, as Theresa May has been out on the campaign trail today, repeating that she's